Hello, class. In this next lesson, we have section 1.5 on problem solving and using formulas, which will be based on those linear equations that we have seen. So the whole point of it is to translate whatever into algebra. So, for example, for some words involving that, which I mean, don't take this to be an all-encompassing list, just because there's no such thing, unfortunately. But for addition, stuff like add, more, plus would work. Likewise, for subtraction, this would be subtract less minus. For multiplication, and I'll express that as a dot. This would be multiply product of things like that. For division, that'll be divide quotient. And for an equal sign, that'll be equals is things like that. So for an example of translating an equation, I have a truck carries bags of corn that weigh 100 pounds each. The second bag carries twice as many bags of corn that weighs 50 pounds each, and the total weight of the trucks is 2,000 pounds. X here will be the number of bags of corn. And we could express this. A is 100x plus 2 times 50x is equal to 2,000 in this particular case. We could combine by multiplying the 2 and the 50 just to make it cleaner. As 100x plus 100x is equal to 2,000, for example. So to actually solve these, the procedure that the book provides is to first understand what the problem is actually asking for, define your variable, translate the problem into algebra, solve the equation, and then check your answer in the original wording to see if it makes, any sense. Which these shouldn't be too bad in terms of it making sense, but you never know what could potentially be the case. So let's say the average yearly salary of a woman with an associate's degree exceeds that of a woman with some college by $8,000. The average yearly salary of a woman with a bachelor's degree or more exceeds that of a woman with some college by $26,000. Combined, 3 women with each of these educational attainments earns $206,000. Now find the average yearly salary of a woman with each of these 3 levels of education. So per the way this is written, a variable is going to have to be the average yearly salary of a woman with some college. Just because the other 2 are written in terms of that, which is why it's going to be a variable. So we have for the average yearly salary for a woman with some college would be X. For the associate's degree, that was X plus 8. For the bachelor's degree, that was X plus 26. And we're supposed to add these together. And the combination of them is supposed to be $206,000. So X plus 8 plus X plus 26 is equal to 206. As we have our 3 levels of attainment, which I'll put in parentheses here just to highlight them. So to actually add these together and solve, combining the x's, that's 3x plus The 8 and the 26 make 34. Is equal to 206. Subtracting the 34 from both sides will make 3x is equal to 172. And then dividing by 3 sadly does not give us a nice answer, unfortunately, but it happens. X for that some college, 172 divided by 3 makes about 57.33 thousand, which I'll just abbreviate due to lack of space. For the degree, so this is the some college. For the associate's degree, that was adding 8 to that 57.33. So in this case, 65.33. Again, this is $1,000. And for the bachelor's degree, they added 26 to the 53.33. So in our case, that was 83.33 thousand dollars about, according to this. For this second example, I have in a triangle, the measures of the three angles are consecutive integers, and we want the measure of each angle. So I'll call x here to be our smallest angle. It doesn't have to be this. But if it's not this, you have to adjust the actual equation. So presuming x is our smallest angle, we have our smallest angle. Since this is a consecutive integer, that's one y after the other, like 1, 2, 3, for example. So if x is the smallest angle, the next one will be x plus 1. The next one after that will be, in terms of the x plus 1, of the original x, would be x plus 2. And in a triangle, these need to add to be 180. So x plus 1 plus x plus 2 is equal to 180. Add the x's together, that makes 3x plus 1 plus 2 makes 3. And this is still equal to 180 degrees. So subtracting 3 from both sides would give us 3x is equal to 177. And dividing by 3 gives us a nice answer of 59 degrees as the smallest angle. The middle angle, adding 1 to that, would be 60 degrees. And the biggest angle, adding 2, would be 61 degrees. Based upon this scenario. So, example number 3. I have you are choosing between two texting plans. Plan A has a monthly fee of $11 with a charge of 9 cents per text. Plan B has a monthly fee of $2 with a charge of 15 cents per text. And we want to know for how many text messages would the costs of these two plans be exactly the same. So, per what we have here, x here will be the number of texts. So for plan A, that's 0.09 times x plus 11. For plan B, that was 0.15 plus 0.15 times x plus 2. And we want to set these equal to each other. So subtracting 2 from both sides, subtracting this 0.09x would make 9 is equal to, this would be 0.06 times x. And then divided by that 0.06 gives us our answer. So 9 divided by 0.06 will give us 150 texts. In order for these two to be even. This fourth one, the bus fare in a city is $1.25. People who use the bus have the option of purchasing a monthly discount pass for $15. With this discount pass, the fare is reduced to 75 cents. Determine the number of times in a month the bus must be used so that the total monthly cost without this discount pass is the same as the total monthly cost with this discount pass. X is the number of bus rides. So in our case, this is going to be 1.25 times X is equal to 0.75X. And we have to add the cost of the bus pass, so plus 15. So subtracting this 0.75 over, 0.75x over. Keep putting an extra decimal. There we go. Subtracting over the 0.75x over, this is going to give us 0.5x is equal to 15, divided by that 0.5 is going to give us an answer of 30 bus rides for this. This fifth one, I have the length of a rectangular basketball court is 40 feet more than the width. If the perimeter of this basketball court is 290 feet, what are its dimensions? So I'm going to call W here the width, and the length in our case is going to be 40 feet more than the width. So I'm going to have to pop that into our actual formulas for this. But we were given the perimeter of 290. So 2 times the length, so 2 times W plus 40 plus 2 times W is supposed to be equal to 290. Distributing the 2 first makes 2W plus 80 plus 2W is equal to 290. Adding the two W's gives us 4W plus 80 is equal to 290. Subtract over the 80. 4W is equal to 210. And dividing by the 4 gives us the width of 52.5 feet. And the length, which is 40 more than that, would be 92.5 feet in this particular case. On the sixth one, after a 30% price reduction, you purchase a new computer for $420. We want to know the computer's price before this reduction. So our variable in this particular case is going to be this original price. So we're going to take the original price, subtract 30%, so 0.3x, and that's supposed to give us 420. So 1x minus 0.3x gives us 0.7x is equal to 420, and divided by this 0.7. 420 divided by 0.7 gives us $600 originally. For this example, in 2020, a city's budget is projected to be $32 million. This is approximately 11/5 of the 2000 budget. We want to know what the city's budget was in 2000. So X in our case would be this 2000 budget. And this should be 11/5 times X. It's supposed to be equal to this $32 million. So just 32 for this. We could multiply both sides of this by the reciprocal to get rid of that fraction. So 5/11. So 32 times 5/11 will give us this value of X, which unfortunately is not a nice number. It runs to be about $14.55 million for that 2000 budget. This next example, an appliance store decreases the price of a 19-inch television set 28% to a sale price of $459.91. We want to know the original price again. So X, original price. So X minus, this would be 0.28X, is supposed to be equal to $459.91. So 1x minus 0.28x is 0.72x is equal to 459.91. And then dividing by that 0.72. It's going to give us an original price of $638.76 based upon that. So those were a bunch of word problems. But we could also be given a bunch of formulas to solve for a particular variable, which is just to isolate that particular variable using what we have from solving equations. So like, for example, in the perimeter formula, we want to solve for the length L. With that perimeter formula being P is equal to 2 times L plus 2 times W. So in this case, we're going to subtract 2W from both sides. So 2 times L is equal to P minus 2W, and then divide by 2. To get our answer of the length is P minus 2W all divided by 2 in this particular case, for example. And then 2 more of that. I have on the left-hand side here the volume of a cylinder. V is equal to pi times r squared times h, and we want to solve for h. So dividing by this pi r squared. H would be V divided by pi r squared in this case. Likewise for the right, solving for P, in this simple interest formula, I is equal to P plus P times RT. So we have 2 P's though here on the right, which is the problem for this. But for this, we're going to factor out that P. I would be equal to P times 1 plus RT. And then divide by that 1 plus RT. So P would be I divided by 1 plus RT. So let me know if any of you have any questions or concerns. Thank you.